Eating that one kiwi can protect their DNA, increase it by 60%. So you can just eat one kiwi a day and it pops up your defense mechanisms. If you eat 3 kiwis a day, it helps your DNA rebuild itself.
On this episode, we're doing a compilation of some of the best nutrition advice from the past 100 shows here on the Model Health Show. And I really love these episodes because we get these really great nuggets of wisdom that we can take and execute on. You know, just very digestible, very punchy, very value-packed insights from some of the top experts in the world. And these nuggets, a lot of good stuff comes in nugget form. You know, it's chicken nuggets, gold nuggets. It's better than chicken nuggets. Denver nuggets. Shout out to Denver. But getting these really value-packed nuggets of wisdom is just one of those ways that I want to continue to add value to your life and to make sure that you are well equipped to absolutely crush it this year and far beyond. And to kick things off, I've got a clip for you from Dr. Jade Teta. This is one of my all-time favorite episodes. And in this clip, he's talking specifically about how your body learns to burn what you give it. Your body learns to burn the various macronutrient fuels that you provide it with. So let's jump into this clip from the amazing Dr. Jade Teta.
Look, our metabolism is exposed to lots of different things, and it likes to have a clear path. It's kind of adaptive and reactive. So, you drove across, from the valley over here, right? And you were using Waze. And Waze was essentially saying, because you were telling me, I got Waze, the Waze app gets me where I want to go. Well, your metabolism likes to adjust and adapt that way, right? Yeah. So it says, there's an angle I can go. There's an angle I can go. Oh, Shawn's feeding me this. I'll use that fuel. Oh, Shawn's eating this way. Jade's doing or working out this way. I'll adjust to that. That's how our metabolism likes to function. Now, when we start feeding it the same things every single day and doing the same behaviors every single day, day after day, week after week, month after month, year after year, we start to create problems in our metabolism, especially if we're doing the standard American overeating. Yeah. And so this happens, you can kind of think about this, imagine all these fuel sources coming into your system. You got carbohydrate from, let's say you eat a pizza or something like that. You got fat. You got carbohydrate, you got adjuvants, these sort of irritants to the gut lining in tomato. You got gluten if you're sensitive to that as well. And your mitochondria and your gut has to handle all of this stuff and all of this information. And you essentially begin to create what I like to call metabolic smoke, so to speak, in these mitochondria, these little energy factories in your cell that then begin to damage their selves. And so what ends up happening is, if you can imagine, it's just like if you're driving down the highway and you're constantly slamming on your brakes, right? Or you're in park and you're revving your engine in idle all the time. You may not necessarily be moving, but you're doing damage to that system. Mm. And that's what all this stuff is essentially doing to our metabolism. And the gridlock sort of way of thinking about this is literally when we are on a diet, let's say, or we try to do something. When we first go on a diet, it works, right? I remember the first time I did it was like 19 years old. I was like, hey, I want to do a bodybuilding show. I got super lean, super fast. But what happens is when I repeat that again and again, I end up getting less of a response. So it's not just the overeating aspect, but it's also, and this is the part, it's also the undereating and overstressing aspect. Either one of those extremes causes this kind of metabolic gridlock. And so we have to be very aware. And the end sort of thing to this for me, Shawn, just to kind of drive it home for people, the one message is that we have to be flexible with our metabolism because it is an adaptive, reactive system. Yeah. And so we cannot keep doing the same thing over and over again, either on the one side where we're overeating constantly or on the other side where we're undereating and over-exercising constantly, if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely, man. Guys, so you already see why I love having you on here, man, talking to you. It just makes so much sense. But also, so with that metabolic flexibility, just to kind of dig in a little bit deeper, this is also considering the fact that your body can use a lot of different types of fuel source, right? So, but we commonly just think of those main 3 macronutrients. Yeah. But there's more, right? Alcohol is one, for example.
Yeah. It's all these things go down to a sort of a common endpoint, right? So it's sort of like when you dump these, if you dump carbs into your system, fat into your system, alcohol into your system, they all come to acetyl-CoA. And then the amount of that acetyl-CoA is a signal to your metabolism. I've got enough fuel or not. And so to make this simple with alcohol, let's say, it's not that it is it's not a fat storing sort of macronutrient, so to speak, and it's not technically a macronutrient, but it is a fat inhibiting. It inhibits fat burning because when you drink alcohol, you basically have a very quick sort of breakdown to acetyl-CoA, and the body sees that and goes, I don't need to burn sugar. I don't need to burn fat. I've got plenty from alcohol, and it will use that source of energy. And that's the first thing to understand about metabolic flexibility. What you give your body, it will learn to burn. So if you're eating mostly carbohydrates, it revs up all those enzyme systems to burn carbohydrates. You become a sugar burner as a result. If you're eating mostly fat, the body revs up all those enzyme systems to begin to burn mostly fat. If you're doing lots of the mix, this is where the gridlock begins to happen. As soon as you dump carbohydrates on top of fat, on top of alcohol, on top of protein, the body is not a good multitasker. It's kind of the biochemical equivalent of rubbing your head and tapping your tummy, or what is it? Rubbing your tummy or tapping your head. Either one. So that's what we have to kind of keep in mind. What we eat, we can train our body to burn. But when we overload it with lots of things all at once, this becomes a problem. There's a really interesting science behind this at the level of the mitochondria that essentially says those mitochondria do much better when they have a straight path to energy. Carbohydrate, right down to the mitochondria. Fat, right down to the mitochondria. It's sort of like a funnel. So we all know what it's like. If you start dumping a lot of water into a funnel very quickly, it will eventually overflow. And so this is where some of the new stuff about maybe some intermittent fasting or small frequent meals, both work, by the way, but this large frequent meal mentality or one continuous meal mentality that we currently have going on with a lot of people is the major problem. And just real quick, so everyone sort of knows, carbohydrate for the body, it's kind of like jet fuel. It's very quick energy. It likes to use that, like if you and I hit the gym together and we do some high intensity or interval training or CrossFit, it's going to grab that energy system. Fat is sort of like diesel fuel. Alcohol is kind of in between the two of them. It can use that as energy, but it doesn't give us any nutrients as a result of that. And protein to me is sort of like the more like the infrastructure of the car. It can use protein to go to fat or carbohydrates, so it's kind of like a flex fuel, but it likes to leave that for sort of muscle development. So the rule here then, if the first rule is, sort of the metabolism is adaptable and reactive, and we need to be aware of that, then the second rule is it's also not a good multitasker. And so for the vast majority of us, we have to be very clear on not overloading it with lots of stuff and lots of different macronutrients all at the same time.
All right, up next on our compilation of some of the best nutrition advice from the past 100 episodes of the Model Health Show, we've got another one of my favorite all-time guests, Dr. William Li. He wrote a New York Times bestselling book called Eat to Beat Disease, and his appearance on the Model Health Show was a big catalyst for the book really taking off. And here we're talking about some very specific foods and nutritive sources that you can take action on and proactively add into your nutrition protocol over the next upcoming year and beyond. All right, so let's check out this clip from Dr. William Li with some things that you can take action on.
But I want to tell you some things that are like not as well known, like, for example, kiwi fruit, right? Everybody's seen a kiwi. It's like this monkey ball shaped thing, furry. Cut it down the middle, open it up. It's got this bright green flesh, really juicy and sweet. It's packed with vitamin C and other vitamins. And there have been studies in humans, clinical studies, in which they've actually taken young people and measured their blood at the beginning and looked at their DNA, how well it does, how well it can protect itself. And then they gave them one kiwi and they ate them. And they measured after a couple of days that eating that one kiwi can protect their DNA, increase it by 60%. So you can just eat one kiwi a day and it pops up your defense mechanisms. If you eat 3 kiwis a day, it helps your DNA rebuild itself. So it actually repairs itself. So, here's a simple, lowly kiwi fruit, like I might have one for breakfast, for example, that can actually do a lot for you.
I want to ask you about one more because I'm a huge fan of this. And I've even recently gotten more into the green teas because I'm a big fan of like mushroom elixirs and teas and, yerba mate and even black teas. But I've been getting more into like the matcha lately. I've been really digging that. And so one of the things you talk about is EGCG being one of those really powerful nutrients that we find in sources like green tea.
So the tea plant, which grows in a bush, is picked a couple of times a year in places that actually have tea. Tea doesn't grow in bags on a plant.
Right.
It comes as little leaves, and the people that pick these leaves and they dry them out in the sun, and then in the case of matcha, they grind them into a powder. So in fact you're drinking the whole leaf, which is why it's more potent. But if you're just brewing the tea, it's the leaf that kind of like sticks around inside the tea bag or sits at the bottom of the cup. I just drink tea with whole leaves, and all the good stuff kind of just is coaxed out of the tea leaf or out of the powder into the liquid, which we then drink. So EGCG is one of hundreds of natural compounds, natural chemicals that are found in tea leaves, but it seems to be one of the most potent. It's certainly been the most researched. It inhibits angiogenesis. It helps protect our blood vessels from heart disease. It might actually lower our blood pressure, protect us against high cholesterol in the blood. Probably coaxes out stem cells as well. A lot of reasons to love green tea. Here's the surprise that I write about in my book. I found it was surprising myself. I'm glad you mentioned matcha. It turns out that matcha and probably the high levels of EGCG in matcha actually can kill cancer stem cells. So while most of the stem cells we have are good and help regenerate ourselves, when a cancer grows, they also have their own stem cells, and those stem cells keep that cancer coming back, right? Those are really deadly. That's the holy grail of cancer research, is trying to find a way to kill those cancer stem cells. Just this past year, researchers found that matcha and the EGCG in it can kill the cancer stem cells in breast cancer. So another reason to like matcha.
I hope that you're enjoying this compilation of some of the best nutrition advice from the past 100 episodes of the Model Health Show. And next up, we've got an episode that we did with Kelsey Heenan. And she is truly one of the biggest fitness and health influencers on the planet right now. And she's working with all these incredible organizations, and she's really bringing an important message and talking about our relationship with food. And in part of her story, she had a very devastating and dangerous relationship with food early on in life, and her evolution through that process, which she detailed in the episode. And by the way, we'll put the links to every single episode for you in the show notes if you happen to miss any of these. And in this clip, we're going to be talking about one of the most valuable parts from that episode, which is the discussion around intuitive eating and the dieting mentality, because it's this dieting mentality that keeps us imprisoned and creates so much conflict in our lives and how we're relating to food. And we want to be free. We want to be free in 2020. We want to be free to have a better relationship, a more productive and health-affirming relationship with food as we move forward into the new decade. And so let's jump into this clip from the amazing Kelsey Heenan.
So intuitive eating basically is learning how to honor hunger and fullness and having the absence of dieting rules. So there are lots of different ways that people put this into practice, and there really are some different phases. So for me, going through, a history of disordered eating, there was a really long phase where I was not worrying about nutrients whatsoever because mentally I needed to get over having all of those rules in place. And that was a really important process for my healing. And then afterwards, there's nothing wrong with being informed about nutrients. I think that's actually very important so that you can understand how to fuel your body well and understand that protein is used in your body differently than carbohydrates and all of those types of things. But you can be informed and also not have all these really super strict rules. You can be healthy and still be able to honor your body's hunger and fullness, because our bodies are smart. They know how to run well, but we so often restrict and create disruption in our bodies because of all these prior history of dieting. So I think it's really a beautiful thing once we learn how to become more attuned with what our bodies are telling us. And intuitive eating is so important. And I think that it can be learned, but it's the kind of thing, we're born knowing how to do this, but we don't trust it. And then we go through all of these different things. And so people think often, if I eat intuitively, I'm just going to eat pizza all the time, or I'm just going to eat cookies all the time. And it's, if you did that, you would realize that you don't really feel that good when you do that. And so that's where you can be mindful and also honor your body at the same time.
Yeah. That was a tough word for me early on.
Yeah.
Being a very just analytical person, science-minded person, when I would hear intuition, I'm like, oh, I don't know. But there's something that like we all experience, and I experienced, but I couldn't describe it. So I just like sweep that under the rug.
Totally.
But for me, I feel like the best definition of intuition is advanced pattern recognition. And just being able to recognize the patterns and paying attention to your internal conversations, internal feelings, and you could see the patterns like, oh, this feels good. That doesn't feel good. This is attractive. This isn't attractive, whatever the case might be. But with intuitive eating, you're also opening it up to experience all of it, and that's so freeing because it's breaking away from what you also talk about, which is the dieting mentality. So what is that?
Dieting mentality, that's a great question because so many people live in this every single day, no matter what way of eating. If you experience fear and anxiety and guilt and stress around eating, you're probably experiencing some sort of element of dieting mentality where you're having strict rules and regulations about the types of foods that you eat and what you don't eat. And there's often a morality tied to it. So I am good or I am bad if I eat or don't eat this food. So this food is off limits or this food is allowed. And it just is this whole, this or that right or wrong. And it becomes something that can be really detrimental to people because it's one thing to, again, be informed about nutrients, but if something is working for you physically, but your mindset is a mess and you are so stressed all the time and feeling guilty and hating yourself, that's not really working for you. You need to have all of it working together.
Okay, next up on our compilation of some of the best nutrition advice here on the Model Health Show over the past 100 episodes, we've got a clip from Dr. Alejandro Junger, all right? And in this clip, he's gonna be talking about the real reason why diversity in our diets really does matter. Now, if you close your eyes and listen to this, or actually, that's if you're watching on YouTube. But if you're listening already, you can imagine that Dr. Junger is Antonio Banderas. I'm just going to say it, all right? Just go on this adventure with me and picture Antonio Banderas. It could be Zorro, could be Puss in Boots. He's got that vibe. But incredibly powerful teacher and somebody who's been in this field helping people for a very long time. And he's got some great, just really poignant advice on why we need more diversity in our diets. So let's jump into this clip from Dr. Alejandro Junger.
Really taking care of your intestinal flora, which is doing 50% of the detoxification work for you anyways, right? So how do you do that? By not eating the foods that will kill them, trying to avoid antibiotics when not necessary, trying to not eat processed foods that contain preservatives and conservatives and other chemicals. So eat whole foods as they come from nature, right? And the more the variability on the color of your diet, the more the variability on your intestinal flora. So eat the rainbow. Tan foods will make you sick. Eat the rainbow. Blue, green, red, yellow, right? So that is really important. The more variability of colors in your diet, the more your intestinal flora will thrive. But it happens to be also that the more variability of color in your diet, the more of the nutrients that your liver needs to detoxify will be available. So this is a really important aspect and very easy for people to remember.
Next up in our compilation of the best nutrition advice from the past 100 episodes of the Model Health Show is another one of my all-time favorite episodes, and this is with Dr. David Sinclair. Now, David Sinclair is a Harvard-trained researcher, lecturer, and wrote one of the really most important books of our time. We're talking about his book Lifespan and looking at the real science of aging. And again, definitely check out that episode if you happen to miss it. It's just loaded with nuggets of wisdom. And in this clip, we're going to be talking about the essential need to include more foods that are stressed, right? Foods that are themselves stressed. Now, you might be like, what does this actually mean? We'll dive into it. He'll talk a little bit more about it, but just taking a broad meta perspective on what this means. If you hear the statement, you are what you eat, we don't want to eat a lot of foods that have a tough time making it, that have a tough time growing. We want to eat foods that are more resilient, more foods that are not easily killed off. We want to eat foods that are more like, that are hard to kill, like that Steven Seagal movie, right? And I just happened to see a little clip of that the other day. And man, wow. Okay, going and watching it now with my updated knowledge and my updated eyes and just seeing him like this and doing his stick training, and his running. Oh my goodness. It's a spectacle. It's a spectacle to see, but he is hard to kill. All right. So eat more Steven Seagal type foods or Uma Thurman type foods, Kill Bill, or Arnold Schwarzenegger type foods in basically every movie ever, including Jingle All the Way. All right. Even on that, he's hard to kill. All right. Going after trying to get his gift for his son. Was it Turbo Man? He was going hard. All right. But actually, I think Sinbad's character in that movie is even harder to kill. I think he actually got blown up and still survived. But it's neither here nor there. We want to eat foods that are stressed, more resilient. They're not easily taken out. Add more of those type of foods in. And here's why. Let's jump into this conversation with Dr. David Sinclair.
Eat foods that are stressed out, which is a weird concept, right? But we do it naturally. We drink, some of us drink red wine, which is a stressed grape before we pick it. We often eat colored foods. So spinach is a dark green food. There's blueberries, which are dark. The whiter ones are not as good. So why is that? Well, stressed food produces a lot of what we call xenohermetic molecules. And I'll explain what that means. It's a terrible word we coined, but xeno, X-E-N-O, means from other species. Mm-hmm. And hormesis is a very important word. You got to remember the word hormesis because every day you should think about it. Hormesis is what doesn't kill us, makes us live longer. And it's a term that means you've got to get your body out of its complacency. You've got to trigger those defenses, those longevity genes. So xenohermesis is you don't have to only run and eat well at the right times, but you can also get these molecules from the right animals and plants, but particularly plants that are stressed. Because when plants are stressed, they're making these molecules of health for their own benefit, right? They're trying to survive. They're turning on their longevity genes. We forget plants have longevity genes too. Mm. So a stressed plant will make these colored molecules to protect from UV and dehydration. When we eat them, they trigger our own body's defenses, and you can get the benefit. So that's nutrition, colored foods, stressed foods. Organic is stressed, right? You don't want the perfect lettuce that's been not put any stress. Mm. And we need to do more of that. We need to let our plants stress a little bit before we eat them.
All right, I hope that you enjoyed that clip from Dr. David Sinclair. And if you're wondering, so what are some good examples of stress foods? Well, this would be foods that are growing wild, right? Wild foods, so wild foraged and wild caught foods, right? That are just out in the elements and the environment and being forced to adapt to conditions, and not these kind of monocrops that are constantly interacting and needing human assistance in order for them to thrive, right? So we want to eat more foods that are wild, foraged, wild caught, if at all possible, just proactively adding in more foods like that. And next up, we've got Vani Hari, AKA the Food Babe, all right? And Vani's just been a huge pioneer, and she is a major reason why huge multi-billion-dollar corporations like McDonald's and Kraft Foods has been taking out some of the most dangerous in clinical trials, proven to be dangerous ingredients that are banned in other countries. Vani's work has helped them to pull those ingredients out of their products. And she knows she's still got a lot of work to do, but just huge credit and gratitude to Vani. And so in this clip, she's going to be talking about 3 questions to ask yourself when deciding what foods to buy. So let's jump into this clip from Vani Hari.
I think, eating is really simple. The only people that have made it complicated are really the food scientists that have created these products, right? Eating is really simple. And if you boil it down to these 3 questions every single time you go to eat something, you are going to set yourself up with success. And so the 3 questions are, number 1, what are the ingredients? And you need to ask yourself, and I go through this in detail in the book, but you need to ask yourself, what are the ingredients? What are the ingredients of what I'm eating? Do I know what's in this food? And you need to know what's in it, and you need to know what the ingredients are. And if you don't understand the ingredient and you don't know why it's there, you need to put it back down. And if you understand the ingredients of what you're eating, you're going to be doing really well. Yeah. Secondly, you ask yourself, are these ingredients nutritious? Okay, yeah, I know that's sugar, but is that nutritious, right? Oh, I know that's canola oil over there, or I know that's, some other ingredient, a natural flavor, right? I know that's natural flavor. Okay, I kind of know what, I kind of know how
sounds
it's created,
natural.
but it sounds natural, right? But is that nutritious?
Yeah.
And if it's not nutritious, put it back down, right? And then you go and you take it a step further and you say, where is this food coming from? Where are the ingredients coming from? Are they coming from a farm, an organic farm that, removes all synthetic pesticides, that isn't produced with sewage sludge, that doesn't have GMOs, that, has, is grown to its best ability, or is it coming from a factory farm, and you need to ask yourself these questions. And that is how you get to the integrity of how to eat. And it sounds so simple when I break it down that way, but if you were to do that at every meal and just ask yourself those 3 questions and commit to doing that for a week, I guarantee you will learn so much, not only about what you're eating and your habits, but you'll start to make some changes.
Next up in our nutrition compilation, we have a clip from Dr. Alan Christensen. And in the episode, he really broke down some of the really remarkable things about our liver and how our liver function relates to our diet and metabolism. And he's talking about a category that we don't really talk a lot about, and we have a lot of misconceptions about in regards to this particular nutritive factor in foods. And so I'm going to let him explain it to you a little bit more. So let's take a look at this clip from Dr. Alan Christensen.
So you want to get adequate protein for liver function. You want to have some fuel, not none. Resistant starch is really helpful. I talked a bit about how the liver modulates what comes from the gut. And it turns out that the way liver makes bile is one of the biggest things that determines whether or not there's leaky gut. So we used to think that leaky gut hurt the liver. Now what we're seeing is the liver is one of the big causes of leaky gut. And when the flora give the liver the short chain fats that it needs, that's a big part of reversing it.
So fiber.
Well, so this is a funny thing. So resistant starch is a category, it's a type of fiber, and then the fiber itself is a category. So one of my projects is that I want fiber not to be a singular word anymore. It's got to be a plural word, it's a category.
Like fat.
Well, there's about 16 kinds of dietary fibers. And I love people to really have their body get healthy and get resilient and be able to eat a broad range of natural food categories. If you cover all the main food categories, you can get 16 types of fibers. If you're cutting out a lot of food categories, you cannot get more than a handful of fiber types.
But yeah, so there's different types of fibers. Resistant starch is under that umbrella.
It's straddled between fiber and carbohydrate. So fiber is non-caloric and not useful for fuel directly. Resistant starch is, but by half. So it's half the caloric load of carbohydrate, but it feeds the flora, and it comes into the bloodstream from the colon versus the small intestine. So there's no insulin signaling or no glucose regulation.
Resistant starch.
Yeah.
That's so fascinating. All right, that clip from Dr. Alan Christensen provided this insight about this part of the category of fibers, and this one is resistant starches. and how important they are for liver function and the health of your microbiome. And if you're wondering what are some sources of these resistant starches, and again, any of these episodes, just if you want to get the full meal, not just a little snack, of course, check them out in the show notes and jump into the full episode. But a couple of the resistant starches, high sources of resistant starches you're going to find in food would be green bananas is probably the most readily available for folks. So when bananas are in their green stage, they're very high in starch. And as they get more and more yellow, that starch translates over to ultimately being totally absent of starch and has just a really high fraction of sugar. So it's switching over as it gets more and more ripe. And so now, just to be clear here, green bananas are not tasty, all right? But taking a little bit of a green banana and adding that to a smoothie, or there's like green banana flour you can use to like add into baked goods and things like that. There's all kinds of creative ways that you can get that in. But that's just one source, green bananas. You've also got the category of beans, peas, and lentils. So just depending on your digestion and how those foods interact with your body and how you cook them is also a really important factor in this equation as well. And so that's another category that we can add in and get some resistant starch. Also, white rice and white potatoes, after they're cooked and then cooled, as they cool, their content or ratio of resistant starch begins to go up, climbs higher and higher. So that's a little interesting hack to increase the resistant starch ratio of those common foods as well. And then another one that's arguably the highest or one of the highest sources of resistant starch is actually tiger nuts. Now, I can't say tiger nuts without laughing inside, and I stop myself from laughing because it just sounds really funny. And it's not the nuts of tigers, by the way. No tigers were harmed in the making of this podcast. It is, it's a type of nut, all right? Well, it just sounds bad, but you can get it as a flour and add it into the same thing kind of with the banana flour. You know, add in the baked goods, you can throw a little bit in smoothie, things like that. So tiger nuts, all right? If you're more interested in that, just go to Dr. Google, check it out a little bit. All right, so those are some actionable things for resistant starches. And now we're gonna jump into our next clip with, I just love this guy. All right, this is Kevin Curry from Fit Men Cook. And this was a really fun episode that we did. And in this clip, he's gonna be talking about some of the profound and truly life-changing ways that cooking has an impact in our lives and how we can actually increase our kitchen IQ. All right, so let's jump into this clip from Kevin Curry from Fit Men Cook.
With cooking, you know exactly what you're putting into your body.
Exactly.
You know exactly what you're putting in. You don't have to worry about GMOs. You don't have to worry about preservatives, extra sodium. You could actually customize a meal for you and your family and for your health, more importantly. And so I think that cooking is really important because it allows you to become a lot more competent with food too. Sometimes whenever you buy a finished meal, the meal may taste great, but you don't know what the individual flavors of the food taste like. And when you begin to cook, you kind of increase your kitchen IQ.
Yeah.
So that way, you know, okay, this bell pepper tastes great here, and it has this flavor. I wonder if I can put this in this recipe over there. And so, more or less, with cooking, you're actually giving yourself more ideas. And if you give yourself ideas, then you can fuel your health and wellness journey for a lifetime. If you're just buying things like out of the box, it's fine for like convenience, but for the long haul, is that sustainable?
Right.
So cooking is the most sustainable form of wellness that we have.
Absolutely. Man, that's so powerful. Kitchen IQ. I love that so much, man. That's incredible. So I want to kind of dive in now and talk a little bit about how do we do this, man? How do we make a great meal? And if we could, you've got these 10 kitchen commandments, right?
Yeah.
And I just thought that was brilliant right off the bat. So if we can, let's just go through some of those.
Sure. The first one is something that I think that we're all kind of guilty of, and that's what I call aspirational buys. And one of my commandments is buy only what you're going to eat. for meal
Oh,
prep.
I like this already,
And
man.
when you walk into a grocery store, you see all the fresh produce, all the colors, and you're like, yeah, I'm finna go and get this. Yeah, I'm finna eat this over here. I'm gonna grab some spinach. I'm gonna buy this broccoli, I guess. Okay, this red chard, these apples. And you know darn well that in about 2 weeks, you're gonna reach into that produce drawer
Yeah.
and throw that away.
Yeah.
Maybe about 1 week. So the whole idea here is when you're looking at meal prep, you've got to approach it in a much more incremental and small way. Don't try to boil the ocean on day one. So only buy what you're going to eat. And that is frustrating because if you go through the food, it's going to cause you to go back to the grocery store. And that's a good thing. Because then you can buy something else and you can have variety. And then it's not seen as a chore, it's just much more seen as a part of your routine. You know, that leads me to another one. It's actually thou shalt embrace variety. So what you were talking about tasting other things and deconstructing, the burger, it's the exact same thing when it comes to meal prep. I think especially people in the fitness world, and I hope that trainers are listening to this too, because I think that trainers sometimes they can get into this mindset that I'm only going to eat for fuel, and competitors can do that too.
Yeah.
That's not the way that most people are built.
Yeah.
And I think
I
that,
agree.
and sometimes we inadvertently kind of push that onto clients.
Yeah.
And-
They say, eat to live, don't live to eat.
Right. and that's great for about a good 5 days.
Yeah.
And that's why they're always having to constantly encourage their client.
Yeah.
So I think that one thing that you have got to be ready to do for meal prep is to embrace variety. There are tons of different cuisines and flavors in the world. And I think that you just need to find little by little, like small ways to introduce those things into your own diet. For me, it looked like this. About every 2 weeks, I would introduce a brand new complex carb into my diet. And if I didn't know how to cook it, I would just go to Google and type in vegetable and then recipe. And that's how I began to add variety. That's how I learned a lot more about Thai cuisine, about Mediterranean, about different Latin cuisine and the different flavors out there. So that way you can always have something different. And your diet, it keeps your palate guessing while also nourishing your body.
All right, we're at our final clip in this compilation of some of the best nutrition advice from the past 100 episodes of the Model Health Show. And this personally for me was one of the most eye-opening interviews and books and researchers. And it's Mark Schatzker, and he is the author of the book, The Dorito Effect. And in this clip, he's going to be sharing with you the rules of flavor and how it's an important and informative guiding force in all of our lives. Flavor matters. And you're going to find out why in this clip from the amazing, incredible Mark Schatzker.
The simple take-home message from all this is that the one thing, we all know this, but we all pretend it's not true. We are flavor-craving creatures. We love the taste of food. We love it at least 3 times a day. You're not going to get rid of that. Only the most strong-willed among us can deny themselves the pleasure of food. The rest of us are in its grip, and for a reason. Because this is the second rule. In nature, there is an intimate connection between flavor and nutrition. The flavors that we crave, the flavors that bring us delight, bring us more than delight. They bring us the nutrients that we need. We know that flavor can build food. You take something like a peach that can be incredibly delicious that isn't chock full of calories. You just couldn't eat a basket of peaches the way you could, like a whole, bucket of junk food. But we also know that with flavor technology, we slice this intimate relationship between flavor and nutrients right down the middle, and we're only left with the pleasure, none of the nutrition. So I want everyone to think about that. And then you think, well, what do we do to try and fix things? It's very simple. You avoid the stuff that's been engineered to be delicious. You do that by looking at the ingredient label, and if you see the words artificial flavors or natural flavors, you just need to know somebody in a lab sat there and tried to figure out how to make this as delicious as possible. The second thing you do is it's not just about eating real food, it's about eating the most delicious real food that you can find. It's really hard to eat a bland tomato. It's really not hard to eat a flavorful, amazing tomato. Yeah. And I think when you look at the parts of the world that are much leaner than us. You look at countries like Japan and Italy and France. They're not all on diets. They're not obsessed with whether it's carbs that are killing them. They eat for pleasure and they eat real food. And I think if we all did that, there'd be a lot more joy in our lives and we'd all be a lot healthier.
All right, I think that was an awesome closing message from Mark Shasker, and I hope that you enjoyed this compilation so much. And if you did, please make sure to share this out with all the people that you care about. You can share it on social media, and of course, tag me. I'm at Shawn Model on Instagram and Twitter, and at The Model Health Show on Facebook. And if you need to, you can, of course, even in the app, the podcast app that you're listening to, you can just hit the button and send this over to somebody that you love and let them know that, hey, I've got your back. We've got some great nutrition advice to help to support your transformation as you go into 2020 and beyond. And we've got some powerhouse, epic stuff that's coming your way. So make sure to stay tuned. Take care, have an amazing day, and I'll talk with you soon. Hey, if you like this video, make sure to check out this video right here to up-level your health today.
We knew very early on that if you were an older person, or if you were obese, or if you had diabetes, they call it diabesity sometimes because they go hand in hand often. Why were these people more vulnerable? Now, they're not the only people